You know what today feels like?
First day of school.
First day of school, that's right.
Ted Lasso is really good and I'm really mad people aren't talking about it. Okay, so I wasn't planning on making a video about this show, but by the time I finished like episode 2, I just knew I had to. See, I had just finished watching Bridgerton and I was still in the process of cleansing my brain from the sheer stupidity of it all. Thanks for nothing. So I just wanted something cool to watch, something laid back, and I heard great things about Ted Lasso, so I put that on. And I gotta admit, while I expected it to be good, I did not see that shit coming. The fact that I underestimated Ted Lasso's quality as a show is not only ironic, you'll understand why later in this video, but it's also kind of frustrating to me. There's 2 reasons for that, and the first reason is simply the marketing. See, the trailer for Ted Lasso does not do justice to the show. It's not a bad trailer by any means, but it really doesn't represent what the show is all that well. Maybe it was intentional, but I do think they kind of missed the mark with the marketing here. But surprisingly enough, maybe that's what made it so special to me, because it was so unexpected. With Ted Lasso, I went in expecting a funny comedy that would be cheeky and bonkers, and I got that in a sense, but I was not prepared for the other aspects of the show. I did not expect Ted Lasso to have so much heart and emotion to it. It truly caught me off guard. I don't really get emotional when I watch movies and TV, mostly because I'm dead inside, but I will admit that I did get really emotional while watching Ted Lasso, and more than once. The show deals with some surprisingly mature themes, and I was not ready for that. What? I'm not crying, you're crying. The second reason why I underestimated Ted Lasso is a bit more broad, and that reason is Apple TV+. So right now, we're very much in the early days of a massive streaming war that will probably be raging for the next decade. The era of Netflix being the end-all be-all of the streaming world is long gone. And now we have a massive number of streaming platforms that all have their flagship projects. Netflix has things like Stranger Things and The Witcher. Disney Plus has The Mandalorian, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Amazon Prime has The Boys, Hulu has The Handmaid's Tale, HBO Max has The Snyder Cut. Everyone is putting their mark around. But Apple TV Plus has yet to release a project that really stands out in the eyes of general audiences. See was a show they heavily marketed, but it didn't leave much of an impression. I don't really see people talking about The Morning Show. I think it did well in terms of winning awards, but like, who gives a shit about awards now? Dickinson was nice, but it also failed to grasp larger audiences. Same with Servant. Like, Apple TV Plus is just really struggling to convince people to go to them. Compared to other streaming services, they feel like they're a little bit behind. So I guess that I subconsciously underestimated Ted Lasso because I haven't really been impressed by what the platform had to offer. But I'm very happy to report that I was wrong. Very, very wrong. But before we get into it, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare, if you didn't know, is a massive online community where you can basically learn, well, just about anything really. That's why it's called Skillshare. Get it? Because it's sharing skills. So I've gotten a number of messages from some of you asking me about editing or just video making in general, trying to figure out a solid process for your own projects. And well, Skillshare is exactly where you want to go for that. There are literally thousands of interesting classes for curious and creative people out there. I personally had a very specific idea for a future video project, so I looked into the iPhone filmmaking class by Caleb Babcock and Niles Gray, which is one of the many classes that cover these types of topics. And here's the thing, the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership so you can go and explore your creativity. You can join and explore any topics you've been curious about and learn about it. And I mean it, anything. There's business classes, finance classes, self-improvement classes, photography, illustration, special effects, interior design, anything you can think of. And then it's only like $10 a month after that. So if you're interested, click my link down below, join Skillshare, and start learning. Thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to Ted Lasso. So Ted Lasso, if you didn't know, he was originally a character created by Jason Sudeikis for a series of commercials for NBC Sports like 6 or 7 years ago. It was all a bunch of cheeky little sketches where Jason got to casually remind everyone that he's still one of the funniest people in Hollywood. But he ended up getting attached to the character so much that Olivia Wilde, who he was married to at the time, suggested the idea of actually creating a real TV show around the character. And he did just that. that. And now we got it on Apple TV+. So what's it about? Well, Ted Lasso, the show, is the story of, well, Ted Lasso, an eccentric American football coach who decides to move to England to coach a Premier League team football in London. Yes, I said football. Don't fucking start with me. I don't give a shit. I'm not calling it soccer. So Ted leaves his wife and his son in Kansas City to make his way to the UK, and he's now faced with the challenges of a new environment, a new culture, and a new job that seems to come with a lot of enemies.
Smells like potential.
I think first off, I'm just gonna say, if you need any convincing, just watch the first episode. Ted Lasso has one of the most effective pilots I've seen in a really long time. I mean, it's not the Mr. Robot pilot, but it's still insanely well done. Some shows take a while to get going and find their rhythm, so you have to give them 2 or 3 episodes to get into it. But Ted Lasso got me instantly, especially in the final scene of the pilot. That's really what got me hooked. It balances comedy and drama seamlessly, and both sides of it are equally amazing. And one of the reasons I like this show so much is the fact that Ted Lasso has a lot of similarities in its plot with Emily in Paris. But here's the difference. It's not stupid. The show deals with the same themes of having to move to a new country for work, finding yourself in an environment that isn't yours, and being surrounded by a community where you're the only stranger, and as a result, having to prove your worth to people who underestimate you for various reasons. There's also the theme of having to adapt quickly to an entirely different culture, being surrounded by people who are not necessarily welcoming, but it's done without making British people look like brainless assholes, like Emily in Paris did with the French. And not everyone Ted comes across as an insufferable dickhead because the show doesn't know how to make a point. And yes, just like in Emily in Paris, some people are mean to Ted, but here they all have a reason that is explored with very specific themes that are unique to each character. The show's never like, yeah, they're assholes just because they're British, that's just what they do, British people are assholes, which is essentially what Emily in Paris did. But to illustrate all of that, I'm going to talk about 2 of the main characters on the show. First off, as you probably guessed, Ted Lasso. The character of Ted Lasso is what many movies or shows would simply paint as the likable idiot stereotype, but here, the show offers a really different take on that trope. Ted is a character that actually has a lot of layers, a lot of heart, and seeing his journey as he starts to win over more and more people is just great. Despite the comedic aspects of the show, the interactions between the characters feel surprisingly human, and all of the characters feel really fleshed out in their own individual ways. Ted is a father, and being so far away from his kid is not easy, and there are moments between comedic beats where the show makes a point of showing you that his adventure in the UK is thrilling, sure, but also kinda lonely. You find out early on that his marriage is kind of on the rocks, and him accepting to move to England on a whim was not just a professional move. And I think the show strikes a perfect balance with Ted. They somehow managed to make him super eccentric and out there, while also making him quite grounded and relatable. And there's just too many things about him that I like. I like that he sees people as equals regardless of their social status. He treats everyone the same, and he makes friends with people who are not really used to even being looked at. There's a character in particular who's really surprised to find out that Ted remembered his name. I like how the first player he manages to create a bond with is a young man who just moved here from Africa and is feeling a little homesick just like him. I like that he understands that he needs to show people he's worth their time and doesn't just expect people to blindly follow him. Right? I like that he makes an effort to learn about people and genuinely tries to make them feel happy for no other reason than that makes him happy. He has a knack for making people feel good about themselves, and he'll put a lot of effort into making your day better if he can. That's just kind of who he is. I like that he knows people will underestimate him from the get-go, and while he doesn't fully understand why, he still uses that in his advantage. But I also like that, unlike Emily in Paris, the show never tries to present Ted as being immediately more competent than everyone at everything for the sole reason that he's an American. In fact, things for him are kind of an uphill battle here. No one really trusts him, no one really respects him. He doesn't fully understand the sport he's coaching, he doesn't really know how to connect with the team. Like, Ted has no idea what he's doing, but he just keeps going because that's the only way he's gonna get somewhere. He can't figure it out if he doesn't try.
Jamie, I think that you might be so sure that you're 1 in a million that sometimes you forget that out there you're just 1 of 11. If you just figure out some way to turn that me into us, sky's sky's the limit for you.
I like that when people are being mean to him, he doesn't try to retaliate or reciprocate the toxicity. Instead, he just kills them with kindness and refuses to hold a grudge, and that makes people realize that treating him like shit is not going to help anyone move forward. He may look like he's clueless and completely oblivious to people's insults at first, but the more you get to know him, the more you realize that he's very aware that people are insulting him all the time. He just chooses to ignore it and pretends like he doesn't see it.
I saw the match.
Oh, yeah? What'd you think?
You were rubbish.
Yeah, maybe so.
There's an entire episode where Ted is being shadowed for a whole day by a disagreeable journalist who's completely hell-bent on hating him. And I mean it, the guy is not even trying to get info on Ted for his article. He just writes down everything he can that will give power and credibility to his hit piece. He's just here to trash him. And Ted is completely aware of that, but he still treats him with kindness and respect. He's welcoming and generous and friendly. So much so that by the end of the day, the journalist takes a step back and actually listens to what Ted has to say and realizes that he's probably not the guy he appears to be on the surface. You just can't help but root for him, he's too good. But with that said, Ted is a super optimistic dude and an inspiring person, but the show is very aware that it's not always the healthiest thing for him. Because yeah, Ted has his flaws. Hell, he even has a fleeting line in episode 5 about how one of the problems he has with his wife is the fact that he's so overly optimistic and overly enthusiastic constantly, and his wife just can't stand it. But he doesn't want to let go of that part of him because, well, that's who he is, and he likes being optimistic. That's a very conscious choice he makes to be as positive as he can be every day, and it's not always easy for him. But that's what allows him to get back up when life beats him down. There's a scene where you almost see him lose his shit on someone who's pushing him just a little too far. And it shows that he's still human, he's still capable of anger and rage, but like every single one of us, he has to battle that. The fun, quirky, happy guy is not his entire personality. It's part of it, yes, but he chooses to put that in the front. Speaking of which, I really like his relationship with his wife. It's really well written. They really make a point of making it multidimensional, and it works beautifully. And that theme of broken love that we've seen a million times over feels surprisingly fresh and realistic here. Ted is essentially in an impossible position. His wife is actively falling out of love with him, and there's nothing he can do about it. He can just be there and watch as it happens. And that's just so painful. But I really appreciate that the show doesn't make the relationship toxic or overly dramatic just for the sake of drama. No, they keep it sort of low-key, and it doesn't make it any less impactful. On the contrary, it feels very human. Instead of doing the Hollywood thing of portraying the wife as an asshole or having them explode in larger-than-life fights, they actually show how vulnerable that situation makes her feel, because it's also hurting her. She's devastated that her marriage is falling apart. It's super hard for her to accept it. She has this one really short but really powerful moment where she tells Ted that every day she hopes to wake up and feel the same way she used to towards him, but that morning just never comes. And that's just such a difficult thing to admit for her because she still cares for Ted very deeply. It's impossible not to feel bad for them. But yeah, overall, Ted is a great character, and Jason Sudeikis gives a fucking masterclass of a performance in the role. But the next character I want to talk about is even more interesting. Rebecca Welton. Rebecca is the owner of AFC Richmond, the club Ted is coaching. She got ownership of it as a part of her divorce settlement with her cheating ex-husband, and since she knew he really cared for this club and its success, she has made it her mission to crash it into an abyss just to spite him. So she decided the best way to turn the club into an absolute embarrassment was to go ahead and hire the most inadequate coach she could find, which made her turn to Ted. Because Ted is a coach of American football, and he only ever coached college teams, and also there's this little detail of he knows nothing about football. So Rebecca hires him, and she's really excited to see the team crash and burn under his direction. What I really enjoy in this plot of hers is the very slow evolution of her psyche. I like that Rebecca becomes increasingly conflicted about setting Ted up for failure, because she's aware that he doesn't deserve that, and you can tell she really wants to hate him because it makes it easier on her conscience. But the more she spends time with him, the more she can't help but like him, because even though she thinks he's an absolute idiot, she also recognizes that he's a good person. She's also in the middle of a very public scandal, and she's being bombarded by the press about all the women her ex-husband slept with when they were still married. married, and she realizes that Ted is the only person who actually takes the time to come see her and ask if she's okay. She's so convinced that she hates him because of her own personal reasons that have nothing to do with him that she doesn't even realize that she's getting attached to him. It's kind of weird to explain with words, but I just love the dynamic between the two. I never really went into that in video, but I really like platonic relationships between men and women in media. A lot of movies and shows kind of struggle with that. They get lazy, and whenever two straight characters of the opposite sex show the tiniest bit of chemistry, they're immediately like, oh wow, we gotta make this a romantic thing. But a lot of times I feel like it just doesn't really call for that. That was my problem with the Dan and Blair pairing in Gossip Girl. I liked them getting closer, and it made sense for them to develop a friendship, but the writers had to turn it into a romance, and suddenly it felt very disingenuous, and I never bought it. So I appreciate that Ted Lasso makes a point of giving us great platonic relationships with several characters, especially with Ted and Rebecca.
So, I spoke to the owner of the Sun.
You spoke to God?
No, the newspaper.
And I just love how the show treats the nuances in Rebecca's character. She can be cold and mean, but she's not heartless. She's still human. She still has somewhat of a moral compass. It's just been clouded by the personal issues she's trying to overcome. I know for a fact that love can make you do crazy things, and no matter who you are, it's very difficult to handle a massive breakup. The show does a great job at balancing Rebecca's persona, finding a sweet spot between the ruthless, vengeful villain and the human being inside of her. And I have to take a moment to just gush about Hannah Waddingham for a second. This woman is just amazing. Most of you probably know her from Sex Education, where she plays Jackson's super strict mother, Sophia. But what you probably don't know is that Hannah Waddingham also played the role of Septa Unella in Game of Thrones. Yes, the Shame Lady.
Shame. Shame.
That's her! She's been a meme for like half a decade and nobody even knows it's her. And while I was already in love with her performance in Sex Education, I don't even have the words to express how happy I am that she gets to shine in a main role in Ted Lasso. She is so fucking amazing in this show, it's unbelievable. She's so good at playing characters with an incredibly imposing sense of authority. Like, the show opens with her, and within 30 seconds I was just like, damn. I do not want to fuck with this woman. She will smash my face into a wall. And I might be into that a little, but it's still scary. Rebecca is one of those people who just own the room the second they set foot in it, and you immediately know this is a person who will not tolerate anyone stepping out of line. And Hannah Waddingham is just perfect for that.
My, aren't you a salty bunch? But I can't remember the last time the press room was this full. There is not a single person in this room who has seen Richmond play more than I have. And in all those years, under the stewardship of the previous owner, I've witnessed nothing but profound mediocrity. Am I wrong?
Well, it's a bit,
Am I wrong?
I think she won a Critics' Choice Award for her role, but award shows are fucking stupid and meaningless, and I don't think that's what should validate any person as an actor, but that's just me though. Hey look, the Golden Globes are cancelled. But she's not only good at playing a hard ass, she also absolutely nails the more intimate and emotional moments of the character. I don't want to spoil it, but I will say there's an episode where Rebecca comes face to face with her ex-husband in the most unexpected way, and I did not expect the tension to be so high there. And it's made even more impactful by the fact that it's kind of the first time you ever see Rebecca in a vulnerable place. It's always a slap in the face when you see a figure of authority as dominant as her being in a position where their authority has no power. It always changes the perspective, and I think that's awesome for her character. They could not have done it in a better way. Because yeah, a lot of Rebecca's dragon girl boss personality is a little bit of a front. Deep down, she's actually quite lonely. She hasn't been able to move on from her divorce mentally, and she's not really allowing herself to just live. She's completely consumed by heartbreak. There's also some trauma in there that she's trying really hard to repress. You learn that she's still struggling to shake the way her husband treated her, and it affects every aspect of her life, even down to the way she chooses to dress. It's pretty interesting because the show almost builds her up like a villain, but then they pull a complete 180 on you and you feel really bad for her. Rebecca is in a lot of pain, and she has no idea how to process it because she's alone. She thinks getting revenge on her ex-husband is going to help her feel better, but she's not too sure she likes the person it's turning her into. There are a lot of layers to her character. I think she's truly fascinating.
That'll be all, Higgins.
Of course.
But yeah, the other characters are all just as amazing. I don't want to talk about everyone in detail because I want you guys to experience it for yourselves, but they're all provided with fantastic writing. There's Roy Kent, he's the captain of the football team Ted is coaching. He's considered an absolute legend in the sport, but he's getting older and he's struggling to come to terms with the fact that he's no longer in his prime. A major factor of his character is his very blatant anger issues, which are used both for character development and just brilliant comedy bits.
Hey, guys, seriously, come on. Talk to me. What's up?
We're in a shit fucking mood because we never fucking win at Everton and it sucks fucking shit.
Roy is a great character, and his arc takes a turn I didn't really see coming, so that was a nice surprise. Keely is easily one of my favorite characters on this show. She's a model who's dating one of the guys on the team, and she's played by Juno Temple, which is always a win. What I really like about her character is that she breaks the lazy stereotype of the brainless model or actress trope that we've seen in so many things. Some characters have broken the cliche before. I'm specifically thinking of Cece in New Girl, who's a character that I particularly like, but Keely does it in a completely different way. She's kind of the moral compass of the show, where Ted is like the nice, friendly unicorn who always wants to make you feel good. Keely is more of a tough love kind of friend. She's the type of person who tells you the things you need to hear and not necessarily the things you want to hear, which sometimes is something you gotta do when you want to be a good friend.
Solid entrance.
What would you rather be, a lion or a panda?
Jamie is also an interesting character, one that you love to hate in a sense. He's kind of the star player of the team and he's crazy talented. Like, the guy is one hell of an athlete, but he's also a selfish dickhead who has completely let the money and fame get to his head, and he only ever thinks about himself. He has layers, and Phil Dunster, who plays him, is just so fucking brilliant in the role, but trust me, there are moments where you're just gonna wish you could grab Jamie through the screen and beat the shit out of him. His character is quite literally designed to push your buttons, and it works way better than I ever expected. But he still has an interesting arc. Like I said, I won't go into the characters too much, and there are more that I purposefully did not mention, but all of them are really good, even the minor ones.
Silver lining here with O'Brien's tour butt is that my man from Montreal is going to be filling in at goalie. Give it up to Zorro.
Oh, it's pronounced Zorro.
I'm sorry, Zorro.
Zorro.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
And what I like about these characters so much is that throughout the season, even when their storylines don't necessarily meet, they're all connected by the same major theme. Because yes, the show is about family, human bonds, and all that good stuff, but at its very core, Ted Lasso is a show about accountability. Most of these characters get through their issues not only by acknowledging when people have wronged them, but also by learning to accept when they are the ones fucking up. They grow by holding themselves accountable. But not like Shane Dawson and James Charles. Like, I'm talking about real accountability here. I think one of my favorite scenes in the entire show is a scene where Rebecca has a conversation with her best friend Sassy, who she neglected and hasn't seen in a while because her marriage took her entire life. Rebecca is also the godmother of Sassy's daughter, and she feels guilty for abandoning them. And during a conversation with her outside of a nightclub, she blames her negligence on her husband, but Sassy immediately shuts her down and essentially tells Rebecca that while she can blame a lot of things on her ex-husband, who was an asshole, her leaving them behind was her own fault, and she doesn't get to make excuses for that.
Rupert is a horrible man who built an ivory tower he kept you captive in, but you're the one who stopped coming home, stopped calling, who made a 6-year-old girl wonder what she'd done wrong. I'll always be your biggest offender, but you have to own up to the part that you played.
It's just really good, and the show addresses that theme in ways that never feel repetitive. It never feels like they're beating you over the head with a message. It's just a very solid part of the story. Ted Lasso is a brilliant show. I could be here all day just going episode by episodes, but I know it's not as popular as other shows I've talked about on here, so I'd rather you guys just go and experience it for yourselves if you haven't seen it. Seriously, it's really good. I have my minor gripes with the show. I'm of the opinion that the show could use a bit more diversity. There are characters of color, but they tend to be secondary entities in the story. The main characters with the bigger storylines are usually the white ones. But it's not like the show just completely dismisses people of color. There's quite a few of them. I just wish they were put a little more in the front, if that makes sense. So in that way, it's a really minor complaint though. I'm nitpicking here. The show is really good. I promise you, it's worth it. And I know that a lot of people will hear the word football and tune out, and I get it, but I swear this show is not about the sport. It's actually a fairly small part of the show. It's about the people, the characters, and their connections. Trust me, give it a chance. And the good news is that if you binge the whole thing and you love it just as much as I do, the show is apparently renewed for 2 more seasons, and season 2 will be out in like a few weeks. So then we can all just gather together, you know, and freak out in unison. I was already late to the party with this show, so let's sync ourselves up. But yeah, Ted Lasso fucking rocks, people need to talk about it more, and now I'm probably gonna have dreams about Hannah Weddingham smashing me into a wall. And I'm not mad about it.
MVP! MVP! MVP!
Left leg. Woo!
Okay.
Right leg. Not as
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ted.
Sorry. Yeah, no, you were saying. Go ahead.